everybody. Welcome to the Patriot Show. I'm your host, Anthony Stephen Malone. This morning, I have a very special guest on my show, Franc Milburn, veteran Parachute Regiment, 10 Para, and Intelligence Corps. Hello, Franc. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm very well, thanks, Ant, and thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure, mate. You've got a lot of history. You've had an incredible life. Can you tell my viewers a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've kind of been on this work experience, the game, about 22 years. I joined the military young at 17. I was still in school. I joined what was then the Territorials, now the Army Reserve. Went Parachute Regiment, as you indicated. I was looking initially to sort of join up as soon as I finished, my A-levels in school, and go regular, basically just go straight in. But I ended up going to university for 3 years. Then I got an offer to go to Sandhurst, which I took up. And after that, I went to the Intelligence Corps, did a short service commission there. So that kind of took me from the late 80s until sort of mid to late 90s. Came out. I did various jobs from there, from journalist to risk management consultant at one of the big professional services firms, KPMG. Then I moved, I think because of my background, I was kind of drawn into the sort of corporate investigations and security world. So then I got involved with a small firm, but had like a really, really interesting client base. And then sort of, the Iraq War II happened, and I ended up going on the circuit, as a lot of guys did. So I did that in Iraq for a while, and from there sort of gravitated to oil and gas security, and I ended up in the Kurdistan region of Iraq for 3 years, managing oil and gas security, and also community relations for oil and gas companies. I'd say I enjoyed the security work very much. The community relations work was really, really interesting, and it was very rewarding. Vaccinating kids. We refurbished clinics. We provided gasoline, generators, all those sorts of things. You're talking, people who don't, kids that don't have shoes. Maybe they eat 1 square meal a day. They don't have, sort of fountain pens or pencils or paper to write on at school. So we provided all of that. The oil and gas company did. I made sure it was distributed. So that was all really, really rewarding work. After that kind of work as well took me sort of like North Africa, Latin America as well, Mexico, and now I do more sort of remote work. So I advise clients basically pre-market entry, political risk analysis, geopolitics. I do corporate investigations, pre-transaction due diligence if somebody wants to invest, or they want to take somebody on as a partner, or they want to recruit somebody new for a senior position in their company. I do all the sort of investigative due diligence on that. So that's really in a nutshell where I am today.
Right. So you've not been around the world much, yet? Okay.
No, yeah, I've traveled pretty extensively, mate. Yeah, I mean, also it's taken me to the Far East as well. But as I said before, having you spent all those kind of years doing oil and gas and security and all the rest of it, and it's just you're spending a long time away from home. It doesn't do your family life any good, and it just takes it out of your traveling as well.
I think. Well, I can definitely relate to that, and I think a lot of my viewers will be able to relate to that as well, mate. Where would you say would be one of the most? I know you've travelled extensively and you're very experienced. Where would be one of the most interesting countries you've been to, and why?
I'd say really Kurdistan region of Iraq was really, really interesting, because it's still at that kind of crossroads, sort of a it's literally just it keeps on being a post-conflict society, but also as well, so it's a country that kind of, or rather a region. It's not a state yet. It's a region that kind of yearns for, a lot of people there. Most of them yearn for independence, but it hasn't quite achieved that yet. And that's what's really, really, kind of fascinating about the place. The people as well, how they were really, really engaging with outsiders. Because some places, you go in the Middle East, people are a lot more kind of, standoffish and suspicious. But I found in the Kurdistan region it was very interesting because you could rock up at some village like in the middle of nowhere and people would be really welcoming, inviting you in for tea, and that's what was really fascinating about the place, and fascinating to see like their evolution, like how far, not being in a condescending way, but how far they've come in a relatively short period of time, because for a long time they were kind of at a stage of economic development that hadn't really changed at all. Suddenly they get a lot of oil and gas investment, it's like bloop, and they're just like kind of taken off. So
Yeah,
it's fascinating from that perspective as well.
yeah, it is definitely a very interesting country. They have supermarkets out there. They've got Saladin University out there now as well. A lot of Western influence is out there as well. Up and coming country, the KRG, Kurdo Regional. Obviously, I'm very connected over there myself. Spent a lot of time over there on the ground helping the people of Kurdistan. You spent time in Africa as well, haven't you, Frank?
Yeah, really, North Africa. I've been to like sort of Tanzania and South Africa as well. I did the Ronin course years ago with Tim Smith.
All right.
Ronin South
Okay.
Africa. Yeah, which was a trip.
Yeah, that was experience.
Yeah. So I've done East Africa. I've supported clients kind of like with intelligence, operational intelligence for East Africa, and sort of transaction intelligence. But my sort of practical experience on the ground is like North Africa, Tunisia, Libya, Algeria, where I was actually physically on the ground, doing all the CP stuff.
In North Africa, in Libya particularly, how did you find that country?
Yeah, I mean Libya, it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, just like the whole scale of the place. Um, and I was very lucky because I spent time like deep in the desert. I also spent time in Tripoli and Benghazi. I kind of worked between the two. Um, it's a very, very beautiful coastline. It's got amazing like Roman ruins. A lot of the people there, I mean, people think, okay, Libya is like a war zone, but a lot of the people there are incredibly friendly as well, as you find kind of throughout the Middle East. Um, I found it very interesting because when I was there, sort of 2011, 2012, you had the feeling, especially in Benghazi, and also to an extent in the capital, but you had a kind of feeling, anybody who'd been in Iraq kind of 2004, before it kind of 2003 to 2004, before it kicked off big time, you kind of had that same similar kind of feeling, the little combat indicators in Libya, that it was about to kick off big time and they were about to start having more IEDs, and this is before it kind of kicked off again. So that was what was interesting about it, but kind of doing the comparison between the two, Libya and Iraq.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because obviously you've been in Iraq before it went very bad over there. And obviously, you spent time in other Middle East countries. In Libya, particular, what indicators did you spot? Because your experience, like you said, anyone who's been in Iraq before it went bad would know that. And being on the ground in Libya, you would see the same indicators there. What indicators are they?
Well, it was, I mean, kind of basic stuff, seeing kind of, more armed people on the street, seeing more kind of like, snap VCPs, just basically the tension in the locals, when you were talking to them or going into shops and things like that. Just little things, whereas before people weren't tense, then they would be kind of like, you could see that there was more stress, they were kind of anticipating that something was going to happen. Obviously, when your local blokes are telling you, like, don't go somewhere where you used to go before, then that's a pretty big indicator too. Mr.
Yeah,
Frank, don't go there. Then it's like, yeah, okay, mate, I won't. And then obviously to the more sort of immediate kind of combat indicators where you start having IEDs placed in hotels that foreigners frequented, whereas before, there was no problem. Obviously, you as a CP guy, you're looking at everything as a potential threat and a potential problem. But places where before it was, pretty easy life for foreigners, now suddenly you've got IEDs creeping in and people wanting to kill them. So that's a pretty big combat indicator. And that
yeah,
was obviously that was obviously before the tragic events that happened, to the United States personnel there in Benghazi.
in Benghazi. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not
but
going to speak about that much now because I've got a special guest that will be
okay,
coming on the show anyway to speak
yeah,
about all of that because he was
that,
there.
But my personal opinion on that is, I mean, anybody who'd been in there before, who'd been on the ground a bit before, you could see it was creeping up to that level of threat. You could see it
Yeah.
palpably.
I think a lot now in hindsight, a lot of people should have seen the indicators a lot more, or
Yeah,
not just the guys on the ground who see the indicators. People, middle management, senior management should have listened to the people on the ground, because when the guys are on the ground, they get to see it as it is, not in a report or anything like that. You've obviously travelled extensively across Africa. When we're looking at some of the flashpoints that have happened in Libya and other countries, moving a bit further to the east of Africa and down to the west of Africa as well, did you see any indicators that it was going to spread?
yeah. I mean, about yeah, even 10 years ago, looking at Kenya, you could see that they obviously had political and socio-economic problems, but you could also see that they were having problems like with their neighbours, especially to the north, and with sort of creeping Islamism. So it's of no surprise to me now that that Kenya is seeing these increasing problems in terms of terrorism. So again, if you've been looking at these things from the start, it's easy to say with hindsight, but there were people who were looking at these things from the start, and it's of no surprise to them that these things have escalated the way that they have. I think what's quite interesting, I mean, places like the sort of spread of Islamism in East Africa, but really that shouldn't have been a surprise. I mean, because you've had terrorism there, for
Long time.
quite a considerable period of time. But I think now it's much more established, and because of Kenya's military intervention to its north as well, that's caused a lot more problems for them.
Yeah, it's involved them. They went from being on the sidelines to be
Yeah,
directly involved now in places like Somalia and other
yeah.
neighbouring countries as well. In West Africa, how would you perceive everything that's happening over there at the moment as well?
Well, very highly problematic, but that's a problem, really, sort of a confluence of, extremely poor governance, corruption, lack of effective local security forces, although now they're being sort of,
Yeah,
bolstered by
that,
kind of like Western know-how and intervention, but also, grievances. I mean, domestic grievances. I mean, you've got conflict going on there that's got, for example, northern Nigeria and places like that, that's got really nothing to do with kind of like radical Islam. It's got to do with sedentary people versus like nomadic people, and water rights and competition for resources. So there's a very, very interesting region of the world,
it is.
and problematic.
Yeah, we could talk for hours and hours about all the intricacies about Africa. Anyway, on that one, we
Yeah.
can get back to on another interview. What you've seen and witnessed throughout the African continent and the Middle East as well, with a lot of the security concerns, it has been creeping into Europe and coming closer, and is obviously a problem the throughout Europe and the UK at the moment as well. What is your opinion about that? What's your thoughts on that?
Specifically on what, mate? Sorry, could you just rephrase that?
On the threat, on like the terrorist threat that was in North Africa and the Middle East. Both of them are connected anyway, so people can come up to Europe from Africa, and they travel overland from the Middle East into Europe as well. It seems to be escalating because of COVID. It's calmed a little bit, but it seems to be coming up again at the moment. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, that's been a big problem. I mean, aside from the issue of like helping people who are sort of generally in need, the fact of the whole open borders policy that happened at the original kind of refugee crisis, or asylum seeker crisis when people coming across. I mean, that was just a perfect example of an ability of everybody from IS to Islamic State to Al Qaeda to Hezbollah to basically infiltrate people in, and also aside, even people who aren't directly working for those organisations, a hell of a lot of people who have sympathy for extremism. I mean, if you have, say, I don't know, of 100,000 people coming in, you only need to have 200 of those or 50 of those even to have major problems further down the road. Who I'm saying 100 of those or 50 of those who have extremist tendencies and or perhaps have received training to cause considerable problems.
Yeah, it is. It is an ongoing thing, but fortunately, the European intelligence services and the British intelligence services and American and other countries have got a good understanding about a lot of what is happening now because of people like Frank. Um, I want to you touch very briefly on the terrorist organization Hezbollah.
Yeah.
Hezbollah is obviously a Lebanese organization, proxy of Iran. Can you tell my viewers a little bit about that organization?
Yeah, it's people often, wonder, whether it's the dog that, the tail that wags the dog, or, the dog that wags the tail. I don't mean any offense to anybody Iranian by using, that's just using an expression there. Yeah, they're a very, very powerful organization. They basically, deeply entrenched in Lebanese politics, economics and society, and obviously militarily. They've been heavily engaged in Syria as well. They receive, pretty sophisticated arms from Iran. They have a lot of weaponry pointed at Israel. They're also, as well, I mean, a lot of people maybe, don't realize they're also a transnational criminal organization. So all the way from Europe, the United States, Asia, Latin America, they're heavily entrenched there. They're heavily involved in the transportation of drugs as well. And they finance their activities through that. They've been involved in terrorist activities as well in Latin America. So they've got a very, very heavy presence globally. They're not just sort of Middle Eastern actors. They've gained a lot of experience in Syria. A lot of them been killed off in Syria as well. And the Israelis are, heavily engaged against both Iran and Hezbollah as well.
Yeah, I think it's really important. A lot of people have heard the name Hezbollah. I used to live in Lebanon. I used to live up in Tripoli as well. So I've got quite a good understanding of Hezbollah. But a lot of my viewers would have heard the actual name. You touched on a very interesting point. Hezbollah isn't just a terrorist organization. It's a criminal organized crime organization. They are one as well. They both support and help each other. After Project Cassandra, obviously you're aware of that, was closed down by the Americans, the Obama administration, right or wrong, my personal opinion is, worst thing they ever did. It enabled Hezbollah to have an open reign for some time, and they used that to their advantage. They just expanded exponentially internationally. The Iranian connection to Hezbollah, it's like you said, the tail that wags the dog. It could be either way. I think Hezbollah now has went from being just a proxy of Iran to being its own organization. It is worth hundreds of millions of US dollars. They're in every country in the world. I've actually spoken to someone quite senior within the British National Crime Agency, and they are very interested in the connections between the terrorists and the organised crime, which are now coming into that. I was very lucky or unlucky, which way you look at it. While I was in the Middle East, I actually sat in a meeting with senior members of Hezbollah, the Iranian Quads, and Al Qaeda and the Yakani network. So anyone who says those organisations are not talking, think again. They are. What concerned me was not that they talk, but they share resources, in particularly intelligence. What is your thoughts on that? Because me personally, being on the ground, I was very concerned about that, because that is a bit of a game changer. Give me your personal thoughts on that, Frank.
Between Iran and Hezbollah?
Iran, Hezbollah, the fact that Al Qaeda has now officially, this isn't me just saying this, a few weeks ago, the FBI, through other agencies, have officially announced that Al Qaeda headquarters is now in Iran.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people, like yourself, in the know. I mean, for example, in Kurdistan, you had you had Sunni extremists, the Abdullah al-Azm organization. You had Al Qaeda Kurdistan battalions. They were all basically based in sanctuaries in Iran and being projected across the border into Iraq and into Kurdistan.
Yeah.
So that's been going on for some time. So anybody who kind of denies the Iran Al Qaeda connection is, that it's a lot more firmly entrenched than people understand. As far as the Hezbollah Iran connection, I mean, they're kind of joined at the hip. I mean, you've had Hezbollah instructors, in Iraq. They've basically, trained and developed clones of kind of Hezbollah, like Khatib Hezbollah inside Iraq. Some of these Iraqi militias have gone to be trained by Hezbollah in Lebanon. The whole Iraqi militia operating in Syria as well, alongside Hezbollah. So they're all joined at the hip, that way.
Yeah.
I got the feeling that the Al Qaeda proxies, I mean, they were looking very much for a sanctuary, and it served Iran's purposes, but they're very much under Iran's thumb while they're operating inside from that country.
Yeah, I think that Al Qaeda are now using Iran as a safe haven, for one or a better word on that. I was very interested to find out about, when I was on the ground in Afghanistan, that Hezbollah were operating in Afghanistan against British troops. Didn't expect to come across that. Like I said, this was first hand. I saw this with my own eyes. I thought that was very interesting, and the IED factories, the shape charge factories that terrorist organizations had in Iran that were feeding terrorist groups in Iraq and Afghanistan against British troops and American troops, obviously. It was all very interesting. Where a lot of people think everything is separated, it's actually not. Most things, like Frank, in the Middle East, everything is kind of interconnected. Or the enemy of your enemy is your friend. That's what the Arabs say an awful lot. What is your thoughts on the Hezbollah organized crime coming across Europe and in England right now? What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's a very big problem. I mean, it wasn't so long ago that UK police discovered a whole load of basically a sort of Hezbollah plot in the UK. I think the problem has been the UK and the Europeans. They fannied around for years, and they had a differentiation between like the political wing of Hezbollah and the military wing of Hezbollah, whereas actually, in fact, they're one and the same thing. So the Israelis know that. Anybody with common sense knows that, but the Europeans basically, and the UK, they allowed these people to operate. Now, okay, then there's a case for saying, well, some of it was so that you can gather intelligence, this and that. But once you actually have a threat and plots being hatched inside your borders and fundraising and all the rest of it, then you need to clamp down on that. And it's stupid to allow it to go on. And I think Europeans have been very kind of remiss. The Israelis have been warning about this for years, and about the ability of groups like Hezbollah to sort of operate in Europe. And then you look at for example, what happened in Bulgaria when Israeli tourists got killed. It's kind of like the classic example. So why has that been allowed to go on for so long?
Yeah, you've touched on something that now we can actually speak about, and that was the plot by Hezbollah in England. We can talk about this now because I'm just going to tell the viewers this. The very senior member of the Mossad, Israeli intelligence, gave the story to the Israeli Times. So it's actually published that there was 3 tons of what could be classed as explosive material. It's all on the internet to read. That was found. The Israelis tipped off British intelligence, who were not even aware of it at the time. That was found in London. Their plans were to make 3 massive car bombs and detonate them in 3 different locations in the United Kingdom. So if people think Hezbollah is not a problem for us in the UK, that is a clear indicator that it actually is. Thank goodness that people acted on that, because that would have been the worst terrorist hit on the United Kingdom.
Yeah, and also, and sorry, just not to forget, this is at a time when Iran is supposed to be working as part of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, right? They're supposed to be, they're supposed to be dialing down the terrorism, but they
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah, I'm actually glad we can speak about that now, because obviously
Yeah,
that would have been a massive hit. Iran is saying one thing publicly, but indicators were that they knew about it. Um, the other interesting thing I want to get your opinion of, which is or was a game changer at the time, was the commander of the Iranian Quds Force who was taken out. I'm going to use that word by the Americans.
yeah,
He visited Iraq. That sent shockwaves everywhere, but people don't realise that needed to be done to protect a lot of American troops on the ground in Iraq and British troops as well. What was your thoughts when you first were told about that?
crack open a beer.
Well, I
uh,
actually did. I actually did. So I would say, yeah, well done. Crack an airstrike, bring it on.
yeah,
Can't say anything else about that. But the ramifications after that meant nobody was untouchable. Doesn't matter what rank you are, you stand against the British and the American troops on the ground, you will be held accountable. That guy, that particular commander of the Quds Force, was responsible, directly, indirectly, for the deaths of British troops in Iraq. End of.
absolutely,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, I've seen evidence of that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's well established, and kidnappings of civilians. I mean, Soleimani was the architect. I mean, he's kind of like a mix between. He was basically running, foreign and security policy for Iran throughout Iraq into Syria, the Gulf region, responsible for the terrorist activity, the spread of militia proxies, genocide in Syria, the war, heavily involved in the war in Yemen. Instability in in the Red Sea and around the Horn of Africa. I mean, he had his hand. He was basically running everything. I mean, I'm not to say that their activities have carried on, but he was an incredibly capable commander. It would be the equivalent of having he was basically the Iranian equivalent of the head of the CIA plus the head of Special Operations Command plus the Secretary of State operating. He had the power to basically form Iranian foreign and security policy and its malign activities throughout the region.
Yeah, I think that taking him out was a good thing. It needed to be done. They wanted to do it for ages. Um,
I agree.
yeah, I think that was definitely an outstanding one. Anyway, we're going to leave that little sensitive political subject alone for a minute. Um, During your travels in the Middle East, Africa, you were managed to experience a lot of the culture of the local people. What part of or what country did you enjoy being on the ground more and experiencing the local culture?
I really enjoyed personally two countries. Well, actually, no, I say three. I really liked Tunisia, but it was a lot more permissive then. Algeria, I loved as well. Algeria and Tunisia, they're both, like absolutely beautiful, gorgeous countries. So is Kurdistan. But I've always been someone who, kind of enjoys taking his shoes off, sitting down on the floor, eating food with the locals, getting stuck in, like local culture. Sometimes, maybe, often just be myself, with an interpreter there, or, having dinner with my local guys who I'm working with. A lot of Europeans I found, especially like working in oil and gas, they didn't want to eat the local food and they didn't want to kind of get involved with the locals. I'm like, man, that's a big mistake. Get stuck in, enjoy the local culture, and then you start getting invited to like weddings and stuff like that, which then it all becomes very, very interesting, very, very interesting.
Yeah, it's yeah, that is definitely an experience. To be invited to local celebrations, including the weddings, is a big honor.
Yeah, it's a huge honor. Yeah.
Yeah, I was very, very fortunate in pretty much every country I've actually operated in, and now thinking about it, I was invited to that. I went to weddings in local weddings in Afghanistan, Iraq, up to Kurdistan. Even spent a bit of time in southern Turkey as well, and Syria. So seeing all the different weddings, the cultures, and everything, definitely an experience. I think to understand a country, you need to spend time on the ground with the people. I was very lucky. I took that a little bit to the extreme. I actually lived as one of them. I wanted to understand the Bedouin who were living in Saudi Arabia, traveling through Iraq. So I actually spent six months with them on the ground, which was a fascinating experience. No kit, living as one of them, but the intelligence that brought was phenomenal. No one was expecting surface-to-air missiles to be transported on a camel
Yeah.
across the desert. Everyone was looking for transport 4x4s and helicopters, and I was like, nope, you got that one wrong. They're bringing it on a camel train. So yeah, people were a little bit taken back by that, and they were like, well, how do you know that? And I was like, well, there's a photograph of me with camels with surface to wear on that the Bedouin were bringing in for the terrorist organisation. Sometimes being on the ground and speaking to them as well. A lot of people respect the fact that people like yourself, Frank, take the time to go in, break bread with the local sheikhs and tea, chai. Chai is absolutely 100% a necessity. You want to know something that's going on into an area, go down, break bread, and drink chai with people in the area. Once they know that you're willing to sit down with them, they are very welcoming, and you'll find that there is a lot of bad people out there, but there's some good people out there as well. And I'd like me viewers to understand the Middle East isn't just a war zone. It is a beautiful place. The culture is nice, and there is some amazing people. And in some of the worst situations, and Frank, you would have seen this, some of the most humbling experiences I've ever had and acts of kindness that I have witnessed have been by people who don't have anything and in the middle of a war. So I've seen the best of humanity and the worst of humanity. Frank, you've been there as well. You've seen it. Is there a particular?
I'd absolutely agree. Sorry, I'd agree, mate. Sorry, go ahead, mate.
Is there?
No, all I was going to say is that yeah,
yeah. Go on.
What I was going to say is that I agree with what you said. I mean, and you find sometimes that, like, some of the people who have, the least material things in life are sometimes some of the most generous and, like, kind people. And I mean, people complain here about, oh, I haven't got the latest iPhone, or I need a new motor, or whatever it is. And then you've just come back from an environment where, kids are having, like I said earlier, they've got, like, they haven't got shoes, and they're eating maybe one square meal a day, but they're getting on with things. I mean,
yeah, it's definitely a humble experience to spend time in the refugee camps in Syria, Iraq, and that is humbling, to say the least. When you come back to England, to the United Kingdom, and you can walk in a supermarket and buy clean food, you turn on your tap at home, you can drink the water. It's the little things that make all the difference. Yeah,
absolutely.
Right, going back, because obviously you're a military veteran, I'm a military veteran. A lot of veterans in this country are going through a hard time at the moment because of COVID. Have you got a message for anyone who's out there?
Yes, I have, mate. Can I quickly cut there?
Yep, I'm just going to find the pause button. Hello, we're all back again. Happy days.
Yeah.
Right, Frank. The message to British and American military veterans who are going through a hard time.
I'd say, don't think that you're on your own, because you're not. Learn to recognize the symptoms. If you're stressed, what you're going through, don't be afraid to talk about it to somebody, but reach out to a mate, or if you feel that it's more serious, look to get talk to a professional. But always look for support, from your comrades, like the Americans say, you're like your battle buddies, or your oppo for the Brits. But reach out to someone. Don't sit there alone. I think now with COVID, people are at home, they're isolated. It kind of magnifies it, and people can be going up the wall. if you can, like stay away from booze and stuff like that. Get on the exercise. There's lots of stuff out there on the internet. One of my favorites is Jeff Cavalier at Athlean He's got like millions and millions of subscribers on YouTube, but he's got like loads and loads of videos like working out from home. You don't need any equipment. That's really, really good. But basically, yeah, just don't sit there and do nothing about it. Get some assistance.
Absolutely, Frank. Thank you so much for saying that. My message to veterans out there: you're not alone. A lot of us are going through this. A lot of people are going through hard times. Pick up dog and bone. Speak to your UPO. Speak to another veteran, or speak to one of the charities. Everything is in confidence. If anyone needs anything, ping me a personal message. Give me a missed call. My contact details are out there now. I can have a quick chat with you, or I can get someone else to give you a ring who is qualified and is an expert. They will help you. So the important message is you're not alone. Pick up the phone. We're all going through our times. I've been through our times in the past. So I'm
Yeah.
thinking from experience. Okay, Frank, I'd like to say on behalf of me and my viewers, thank you so much for coming on to the Patriot Show. It's been an absolute pleasure, and you got a cat as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I hope to see you again on the show in the future, mate. Very informative. I hope the viewers are able to take a little bit of something from this interview, because we spoke about some things that are not mega well known out there, but we haven't reached OPSEC or anything. Everything has been checked anyway. Okay, Frank, thank you so much for being on the Patriot Show. Thank you, everybody. There is going to be some sponsor and supporters videos at the end. Veteran owned companies. Please watch them. They're outstanding. Thank you very much, everybody. Goodbye.
Thanks, buddy.